A young woman resting on a sofa, a computer balanced on her lap. That remains the final memory anyone holds of Katelyn Markham. No panic, no desperate escape. She was simply a college student tackling assignments on a quiet summer night, with her loyal dog close at hand and her future husband sharing the space. He supposedly remained planted there for hours. Then, past the midnight hour, she vanished. Comprehending such an abrupt disappearance from an otherwise flourishing existence requires retracing steps. It demands a hard look at the community, a look at the victim herself, and crucially, a deep dive into a romance her inner circle was just starting to question. Fairfield, Ohio, presents a subtle facade. Heavy summer moisture clings to the air, while insects provide a steady, nocturnal soundtrack. It features residential blocks, where cookie-cutter exteriors conceal the unique, sometimes dark realities hidden behind closed front doors. It projects an illusion of absolute security, the sort of mundane suburb where tragedies simply do not occur. Katelyn Helen Markham arrived on August 16, 1990. From her very first breath, unconditional affection surrounded her. Dave, her father, purposefully chose to adopt. Upon receiving the news, he rushed to the maternity ward, cradling his newborn girl a mere 20 minutes after she entered the world. Pressing the infant close to his heart, he recalled being utterly transfixed, unable to tear his gaze away from her face. Within those clinical walls, everything felt perfect. Beyond them, an unseen darkness was slowly beginning to take shape. She spent her childhood beside Ally, a sibling trailing her by 4 years. Though a marital split fractured the household early on, both caregivers stayed fiercely involved. The girls forged an unbreakable bond. They cultivated that profound connection unique to blood relatives, grounded in shared history yet colored by distinct personal perspectives. Interviewing those in her orbit reveals a haunting pattern. They all grasped for identical adjectives, only to find language woefully inadequate to capture her spirit. She possessed a rare empathy. Her signature trait was cracking up at her own punchlines before reaching the end. She radiated a magnetic authenticity that drew others in. Yet, one specific quirk reveals the core of her identity perfectly. Pigment frequently stained her hair, never as a calculated aesthetic choice, but merely because she was entirely oblivious to it. Her artistic hyperfocus consumed her completely. Whenever she finally broke her concentration, the colorful mess had already set in. Drawing pads littered any surface she claimed, while her trusted camera remained a permanent fixture at her side. A striking sunbeam demanded immediate documentation before it faded into memory. Her former instructor summarized this compulsion perfectly. She wasn't merely talented with a brush. Her entire cognitive process relied on visuals. Eventually, she joined the Art Institute of Ohio in Cincinnati. Studying visual media, she thrived immensely. As the warm months of 2011 approached, her creative output reached an unprecedented peak. Digital storage limits were pushed to the brink. She maintained shifts at David's Bridal, rented a Dorset Drive residence, and worshipped her canine companion. The future she tirelessly built was finally materializing before her eyes. John Carter entered the picture when she turned 16. Their paths crossed inside a tight-knit local peer group, a hallmark of claustrophobic suburban living. A fellow Fairfield native, John had a single year of age on her. His medium was flame and liquid glass. Molding delicate structures at blistering temperatures required rigid discipline, exactness, and a chillingly calculated temperament. Observers from their initial dating phase labeled it a harmonious match, a pair of quirky adolescents providing mutual equilibrium. Approaching the spring of 2011, their 6-year milestone arrived alongside a marriage offer, sealed with an ancestral diamond. Dave offered paternal approval, prioritizing his child's joy and security above all else. A future roadmap quickly materialized. Post-college relocation to Colorado promised a clean slate. John obsessed over the impending move vocally and relentlessly. Caitlyn echoed these sentiments aloud. Yet, sharp-eared confidants began detecting a subtle, unsettling shift in her delivery. An unmistakable hollow tone emerged, an unpracticed reluctance slipping through her facade. Behind locked residential doors, the romantic illusion was fracturing. Around June of 2011, Caitlyn began whispering guarded truths to an intimate companion regarding the reality of her engagement. Suffocating dominance. Vicious paranoia triggered by simple interactions with other males, leaving her entirely drained by the constant emotional policing. She explicitly confessed the affection had died. She felt caged, having matured drastically from the naive 16-year-old who initially accepted his advances. A chilling financial errand occurred 3 weeks prior to her vanishing. Caitlyn visited the GE credit union alongside John's mother for a standard application. While at the teller's desk, her future mother-in-law offered a supposedly lighthearted quip. A signature would be provided, the older woman teased, contingent on dragging John to Colorado. The branch supervisor chuckled, anticipating a reciprocal smile. The young bride-to-be offered no smile. The supervisor later recalled a haunting, deadpan stare that utterly derailed the casual atmosphere, projecting the aura of a captive, merely going through the motions, silently calculating a drastic exit strategy she dared not whisper. That paperwork remained permanently unfinished. A shared acquaintance dropped by the Dorshire Drive residence on the night of August 13, 2011, joining the couple for a casual hangout. Detectives later learned from this guest that Caitlyn remained anchored to the sofa, buried in looming academic assignments with a computer balanced on her lap. A profound, uncharacteristic silence clung to her, an unsettling detachment the visitor struggled to articulate. Her vibrant energy and signature humor were completely absent. The guest departed at roughly 10:45. Walking out the door after his farewells, he unknowingly left her alone with John for what would be their final encounter. A hauntingly brief timeline emerged. An outbound message at 11:36, followed by her cellular signal vanishing shortly after midnight. Within that silent hour, the townhouse harbored a dark secret that remained buried for 13 years. Then came the dispatch audio. "Greetings, this is John Carter dialing." Aware of the standard 24-hour waiting period, he informed the operator that his soon-to-be wife had vanished. He claimed she was gone without a trace. Yet, analyzing the audio reveals a chilling psychological layer. His delivery was meticulously measured. Every piece of information unfolded with unnatural precision, carrying the distinct cadence of a practiced script. Questioned about any recent domestic disputes, he fired back a denial instantly. There was zero hesitation, no mental review of the previous evening. Such rapid-fire certainty rarely stems from a panicked, exhausted partner. It suggests a suspect anticipating the inquiry. His verbal stumbling only surfaced during the most peculiar moments. He faltered strictly on basic, undeniable facts details a grieving fiancé would instinctively recall. Unprompted, he casually planted a seed about the nearby Sacred Heart Festival, vaguely shifting suspicion toward shady drifters roaming the neighborhood. Long prior to any official hunt, he was already manipulating the investigative lens. Law enforcement breached the Dorshire Drive property, only to be met with an eerily pristine environment. Devoid of shattered windows or violent disarray, the residence offered zero physical clues. Caitlyn's handbag rested on the mattress, guarding her keys, identification, and unspent money. Her garments remained securely hung, while her footwear sat idly near the entrance. The sole absentees were the young woman and her mobile device. Yet, discovering her beloved pet abandoned outside struck a chilling, discordant note among her inner circle. Abandoning her animal companion was fundamentally contrary to her nature. She never departed without securing his welfare. This subtle, heartbreaking anomaly screamed of foul play louder than any traditional evidence. Chasing the seed planted earlier, Fairfield authorities interrogated staff, merchants, and attendees at the local carnival. The entire avenue of inquiry became a dead end, with every potential transient suspect swiftly eliminated. The Sacred Heart Festival proved to be a phantom lead, inevitably redirecting the investigative glare toward the sole individual present during her final hours. Locals rallied instantly, mobilizing a massive grassroots effort. Swarms of citizens continuously scoured forests, creeks, public green spaces, and abandoned rail lines with desperate urgency. Dave Markham anchored the operation, driven by the frantic momentum of a father refusing to surrender to an unthinkable reality. Equestrian units traveled from Texas to assist. Financial bounties skyrocketed, and the disappearance gripped the entire country. John Carter played his part perfectly, weaving through volunteer groups and soaking up media spotlights whenever possible. He publicly declared his undying affection and profound terror, lamenting his shattered plans to celebrate her upcoming birthday at Red Lobster. To the untrained eye, he projected the quintessential image of a broken partner. However, seasoned detectives observed a disturbing disconnect between his outward theatrics and the unfolding evidence. Less than 48 hours into the crisis, John faced an interrogation room. Authorities deployed vocal tension technology, acting not as definitive proof, but as an investigative compass. This tool functions purely to separate dead ends from vital clues. and it provided a remarkably precise trajectory. Inquiries regarding his knowledge of her vanishing triggered immediate signs of falsehood. Probing his direct culpability yielded identical treacherous readings, uniformly spiking throughout any mention of August 13th. Then, detectives zeroed in on his throat. Vicious, crimson lacerations tracked across his skin wounds, utterly inconsistent with a clumsy grooming accident. Confronted about the gouges, John instinctively blamed his razor. Pushed further during subsequent interviews, his alibi crumbled into a convenient case of amnesia. An acquaintance corroborated that those distinct marks were entirely absent on the evening of August 13th. The injuries miraculously materialized the very morning the young woman vanished. Meanwhile, a more sinister psychological pattern was quietly crystallizing. During the initial chaos following her vanishing, a close confidant of the missing woman shared a disturbing observation with law enforcement. While lingering around John, an unforgivable linguistic slip continually haunted her. He exclusively spoke of his fiancée as if she were already dead. It was the subconscious betrayal of a guilty mind, leaking grim realities, despite the desperate charade trying to bury them. Barely 48 hours had passed since she simply vanished into thin air. Yet Dave Markham's instincts triggered instantly during that initial, frantic phone call from John. Amidst the shrieks declaring Caitlyn gone, the grieving father immediately detected a haunting void, the glaring absence of a normal reaction. The fiancé completely omitted the natural, panicked inquiries. No demands of whether Dave had spoken to her, spotted her, or knew her whereabouts. Instead, it was delivered as a stark declaration. Reflecting on those wails piercing the phone speaker, Dave later confessed he sensed deceit from the very first syllable. Cellular data eventually transformed those early doubts into concrete red flags. Digital logs showed a flurry of messages bouncing between the couple from 11 o'clock that evening until 36 minutes past the hour. Then, absolute dead air. Exactly 12 minutes after midnight, each device simultaneously disconnected from the network without a single fraction of a second between their terminations. A perfectly synchronized blackout. A pair of lovers, a pair of cellular devices, plunged into digital darkness at the exact same millisecond. Pressed by detectives regarding the missing digital thread from that fateful evening, John brushed it off as a clumsy mistake, claiming he wiped the history unintentionally. However, a subsequent interrogation yielded a completely different narrative. The new alibi framed the deletion as a desperate attempt to clear digital storage, supposedly to make room for an impending flood of texts from worried acquaintances. This was 2011. Cell phones simply didn't require that kind of extreme space management. His justification crumbled beneath the flimsiest scrutiny. Meanwhile, the victim's device, the one piece of evidence that could truly speak for her, vanished without a trace. It remained permanently lost to the ether. Locals relentlessly scoured the landscape, while news crews captured every agonizing moment. Through it all, John Carter maintained his public presence, continually delivering dialogue and playing the part of a shattered lover for an audience, desperate for a breakthrough in a seemingly unsolvable mystery. Behind closed doors, however, audio analysis painted a deceptive picture. Fresh abrasions were locked into police evidence files, and that simultaneous digital blackout lingered like a ghost over the investigation. More importantly, a grieving patriarch, the man who first cradled her when she was barely 20 minutes into this world, possessed a visceral, sickening certainty about her fate long before forensics could catch up to his parental intuition. Yet, officially, the investigation had slammed into a brick wall. Consequently, it settled into the chilling stasis typical of unsolved mysteries, biding its time while the ruthless media machine spun forward. Barely a few weeks post-vanishment, the swarms of broadcast vans clogging Fairfield's roadways gradually dissipated as widespread broadcast interest evaporated. Fresh tragedies dominated the headlines as they inevitably do, and the intense, suffocating spotlight that had illuminated this specific nightmare started to permanently fade. Bounty money continued to pile up, and weathered posters clung to utility poles. Yet, society's unforgiving momentum pushed past the tragedy, leaving the mystery behind. Dave Markham, however, refused to yield an inch. He remained a fixture on the front lines, organizing grid sweeps, storming town halls, and speaking to any soul willing to lend an ear. He even spearheaded the formation of a local branch for Texas EquuSearch, the grassroots recovery group that heavily deployed resources throughout Fairfield's dense woodlands and open pastures. While the masses combed the brush for his own flesh and blood, Dave began hunting for the missing girls of strangers, desperately funneling an agonizing, paternal restlessness into the only productive outlet available to a man trapped in purgatory. He navigated the exact same blacktop stretches night after night, peering down into overgrown ravines he had scoured 100 times prior. Quitting simply wasn't an option. Halting the hunt equated to surrendering his little girl, a betrayal fundamentally hardwired out of his DNA. Back in the spotlight, John Carter maintained his deliberate broadcast presence, engaging with reporters and standing somberly at candlelight gatherings. He would literally stand shoulder to shoulder with Dave during public rallies, articulating his grief regarding Caitlyn through highly calculated, sterile rhetoric. Observers silently noted a chilling lack of genuine weeping, mentally cataloging the emotional void. Tina Barrett, an attorney familiar with the household since 2011, eventually articulated this grim observation with absolute bluntness. She had meticulously observed John Carter's behavior over a prolonged time frame. Throughout every single press conference, televised plea, and organized sweep, she didn't catch him shedding a single, authentic tear until the exact moment his own freedom felt threatened. Fast forward to September of 2011, roughly 1 month post-disappearance, when John Carter finally submitted to a rigorous lie detector screening. He failed miserably. While truth verification tests hold zero weight in a criminal trial and cannot legally determine culpability, the outcome handed law enforcement a crucial breadcrumb. It provided a clear focal point, offering detectives a precise map of exactly where the suspect's narrative fractured. For John, those glaring cracks emerged the second anyone probed into the timeline surrounding the evening of August 13th. Both the technician and the lead detectives flagged overt deceit. Yet, recognizing a lie and securing a legal conviction are two entirely different beasts, a canyon of burden of proof that would require years to bridge. As the calendar hit the middle of 2012, a fresh, fleeting clue materialized. Authorities had recently slapped a man named Garrett Kang with severe criminal charges regarding a predatory assault targeting a female victim over in Oxford, Ohio. Given his geographic proximity, residing and holding a job practically a stone's throw from Caitlyn's residence, near a corner fuel stop, detectives heavily scrutinized him as a prime suspect. Locals immediately clung to this development, fueled by the sheer, ravenous need for closure. Fairfield law enforcement tore into his background with ruthless precision, only to ultimately rule him out with absolute certainty. Dave Markham later recounted an unexpected collision with Kang at that very same service station long after the man was exonerated. The moment Kang made eye contact across the register, the sheer weight of the accusation visibly crushed his posture. Locking eyes with the devastated father, he merely whispered a repetitive, haunting apology. Dave admitted the raw exchange shattered him, fully aware that this innocent bystander had been unjustly dragged through hell. As subsequent months bled away, and fresh witnesses quietly filtered into precinct interrogation rooms to spill their secrets regarding the missing woman, a deeply disturbing dynamic regarding the couple's true reality surfaced, aggressively dismantling every squeaky clean narrative John had fed to the press. Those closest to Caitlyn painted a grim picture of a woman silently suffering for months. John's hidden drug habits and suffocating dominance had thoroughly exhausted her, revealing a sinister private face contrasting his public mask. By June 2011, she confessed to a confidant that her affection was dead. She felt completely cornered, emphasizing that Colorado was entirely his obsession. While he endlessly fantasized about the move, she was the one quietly stockpiling cash and securing logistics. He drained their finances. Her real agenda, however, was plotting an escape from the doomed romance. He was packing for a shared future. Detectives soon realized that the dark void separating these conflicting realities held the key to the mystery. Yet psychological friction holds no weight in court, and hard proof remained maddeningly elusive. Spring thawed into April 2013. On the 7th, two locals wandered the creek beds flanking Big Cedar Road in Cedar Grove, Indiana, 30 miles from Fairfield. Hunting for salvageable metal, the pair knew the rugged terrain well, perfectly at ease in the heavy, isolated silence of the backwoods. Stumbling upon a heap of rubbish bundled inside dark plastic garbage bags, it would have been incredibly easy to just keep walking, but they stopped. Peeking through the torn material was a human mandible, prompting an immediate call to 911. Franklin County deputies and the Indiana State Police quickly locked down the perimeter. Scattered across the makeshift dumping ground, totally unburied, and lacking any attempt at concealment, the grisly discovery lay casually tossed beneath ordinary refuse. These were the bare bones of a female victim. Within days, dental matches delivered the grim confirmation Katelyn Markham had been found. After 20 agonizing months missing, the subsequent pathological analysis proved meticulous, calculating, and profoundly unsettling. Dirt analysis confirmed her skeleton was never interred at that specific spot. The corpse was merely discarded there. Authorities suspected a secondary crime scene. Chillingly, the victim's cranium was discovered segregated inside a tightly knotted grocery sack. Pathologists quickly noted a horrifying detail. The tissue degradation did not occur within that plastic enclosure. Someone had bagged the remains only after severe putrefaction had ravaged the flesh at a completely different location. This suggested the killer brazenly revisited the initial dumping ground, packed up Katelyn's deteriorating body, and transported her again. Examining her left wrist, specialists uncovered 3 to 4 distinct blade marks, including a surgical, V-shaped gouge scraped directly into the cartilage. These lacerations defied both accidental trauma and environmental decay, leading the coroner to officially classify the tragedy as murder. Yet, the exact lethal mechanism remained an enigma. Seeking answers following the gruesome unearthing, a local journalist texted John Carter for his reaction. His digital reply was terse, claiming his previous media appearances were strictly a tool to locate his missing fiancé. With the search concluded, he insisted his tolerance for the spotlight had completely evaporated. He expressed a desire to grieve quietly and rebuild his shattered world. Strikingly absent was any fury toward her executioner. He made 0 demands for retribution. The man who once declared her his soulmate demanded no justice, seemingly eager to simply close the chapter. Reading those words, an icy resolve calcified within Dave Markham. It was an instinctual dread he had carried since that very first horrific notification. He vividly remembered the theatrical wailing, the abrupt declarations, and the chilling lack of frantic inquiries typical of a genuinely terrified partner. He had stood shoulder to shoulder with John at endless rallies and candlelit gatherings, harboring a dark suspicion that had since crystallized into absolute fact. Refusing to let the trail go cold, Dave aggressively petitioned the Butler County Sheriff in 2015, demanding they strip the Fairfield authorities of jurisdiction. The local precinct had completely exhausted every lead and hit a brick wall. It was time for fresh eyes to dissect the narrative. Management agreed, assigning a brand new squad of seasoned detectives to the mystery. 10 overflowing cartons of evidence were unsealed, dissecting the timeline from day one. Crucially, a resident living adjacent to Katelyn finally broke their silence. During the late hours of August 13th, this witness recalled aggressive, muffled arguing echoing through the shared walls, punctuated by a single, desperate utterance. The word no, chanted over and over. Meanwhile, cyber analysis began painting an equally damning digital portrait. Telemetry data revealed John Carter's cellular device went completely dead for 15 straight hours, starting in the pre-dawn darkness of August 14th. This eerie blackout perfectly aligned with the logistical window required to smuggle a corpse 30 miles into another jurisdiction and abandon it off Big Cedar Road. 15 hours of radio silence from a suspect who paraded in front of cameras, claiming he had spent that very time frame frantically dialing his vanished lover. By January 2021, John Carter found himself strapped into the chair for his 3rd lie detector evaluation. Standard scoring dictates 0 means truthfulness, while a -3 flags heavy deceit. Astonishingly, John Carter registered a catastrophic -25. Polygraph experts were floored. The biometric spikes were so violently erratic that truthfulness was scientifically out of the question. The physiological needle jumped most violently when interrogators explicitly asked if he had personally discarded Katelyn along the desolate stretches of Big Cedar Road. Detectives confronted Karen Winkler with these disastrous metrics, questioning her son's repeated failures. Her chilling defense? Pointing out that infamous killer Jeffrey Dahmer had once beaten the machine. She offered the remark defensively, assuming it closed the matter entirely. Speaking softly, the detective clarified Jeffrey Dahmer was never the subject. The focus remained solely on her boy. During a concluding interrogation, the detective delivered a chilling remark straight to John, leaving a heavy, lingering tension hanging in the air. "I have questioned 1,000 individuals across murders, violent assaults, and intrusions. Yet, I had never interrogated an actual psychopath," he confessed. He recalled telling his partner that John's departure marked his very first encounter with true darkness. On March 22, 2023, police body cameras recorded John Carter finally being apprehended right outside his workplace. Authorities stood ready the instant he exited the building. Before his mask could slip back into place, the lens recorded a fleeting, vulnerable expression, a suspect who spent 12 years entirely convinced he had outsmarted the system. He displayed neither surprise nor righteous anger. Instead, his demeanor crumbled, resembling a deceitful architect witnessing his meticulously constructed lie totally shatter. Authorities promptly indicted him on 2 separate murder charges. Carter argued they lacked forensic proof. The detective conceded the absence of hard biological traces, but highlighted a massive mountain of extremely damning circumstantial clues. John instantly requested an attorney. However, another crucial, indirectly sourced narrative surfaced afterward. Judges heavily scrutinized this specific type of hearsay, given its total reliance on an intermediary narrator. A fellow prisoner conversed with John during his pre-trial detention. He claimed John secretly confessed regarding the events inside that townhouse on August 13, 2011, a violent dispute, Caitlyn hitting the floor, and his grip. Then came a dead quiet. He bypassed absolute terror or accidental claims, opting instead to stage the horrific scene as a tragic suicide. Only John Carter possesses the absolute truth regarding those jailhouse claims. Yet, the narrative mirrored the undeniable facts with disturbing accuracy. It perfectly matched her slit wrist, the cryptic door message, and 12 years of a supposedly grieving lover failing to demand answers about her tragic demise. Following apprehension, John Carter submitted a $1 million bail and freely exited the facility. Returning to his residence strapped with a tracking device, he basically resumed his exact, undisturbed existence for another 12 months, just like the previous 12 years. Meanwhile, Caitlyn's desperate relatives braced themselves for a highly anticipated courtroom battle they felt entirely prepared to face. Prosecutors legally summoned over 50 individuals while meticulously cataloging the grim evidence. Testifiers received extensive briefing. June 2024 became the universally recognized, highly anticipated deadline. 3 weeks prior to opening statements, John Carter's legal representatives unexpectedly approached the state, floating a potential plea agreement. When questioned regarding the negotiation's origins, state attorneys bluntly confirmed reality. Carter's counsel initiated contact, completely unprompted. Observers, tracking John Carter since 2011, analyzing his calculated behavioral patterns over 13 years, instantly grasped the dark implication. Attorney Tina Barrett, an unwavering ally to Dave Markham throughout the ordeal, bluntly diagnosed the situation. Carter exclusively surrendered because he fully anticipated receiving a light probationary sentence. For 13 years, he successfully dodged all legal consequences. He planned on evading justice indefinitely. However, one Friday in June 2024, John Carter entered a Butler County court admitting guilt to merely one involuntary manslaughter charge, a supposedly accidental fatality resulting from a minor physical altercation. Escaping any formal murder classification, it completely ignored the premeditated evil suggested by his journals, creepy verses, slit wrists, and 12 years of meticulously maintained deception. A botched minor assault became the official narrative. 13 agonizing years involving a vanished girl, a relentlessly determined father, nocturnal community search parties, and outbuildings hiding identical plastic wrap ultimately culminated in this pathetic resolution. Dave Markham occupied a gallery seat during that agonizing confession. He later confessed to violently trembling, consumed by a blistering rage, making him physically restless. Carter possessed 13 long years to claim accidental death, to speak up, to offer Caitlyn's devastated relatives the ultimate closure they craved above simple legal retribution, the actual truth. Instead, he delayed until 3 weeks prior to total courtroom exposure. Then, he manipulated a cowardly bargain, reducing his liability, cleverly securing 6 extra weeks of absolute liberty awaiting his fate. 6 additional weeks after 13 hidden years, Dave called out the obvious injustice, acknowledging the deeply flawed reality. Judgment Day finally materialized during summer 2024. John Carter remained completely silent facing Judge Dan Howhey, while his defense boldly requested sheer probation without any incarceration. Asking leniency for a suspect hoarding identical plastic material mirroring the horrible bindings discovered wrapped around Caitlyn's corpse, a man boasting ominous door messages regarding wrists who outright bombed his polygraph with a -25 score. Total probation. Treating this gruesome history as something fixable via basic monitoring and routine meetings proved absurd. Judge Haughey vehemently denied the insulting request. The court declared that issuing anything less than the harshest possible penalty would be an insult to the sheer devastation John Carter left in his wake. John Carter received 36 months behind bars, the absolute ceiling under Ohio statutes for involuntary manslaughter as a third-degree felony. 36 months, 3 brief years, traded for a young woman who had already been missing for 13. Taking the floor, Dave offered a gut-wrenching victim impact statement. Standing before the magistrate, he pleaded for John Carter to suffer just a sliver of the agony Caitlyn's loved ones endured since August 2011. Caitlyn's absolute best friend, Michelle Feist, also took the stand. While she admitted a certain relief in finally having answers, a heavy pause followed. "Really? What is the truth?" she questioned. The precise sequence of events remained shrouded in mystery, and somehow he was still pushing back against reality. That was the chilling part. John Carter remained dead silent. No rationale was offered. He refused to utter a single syllable to the desperate families who agonized for 13 years. Handed the floor to finally provide some semblance of accountability, he opted for absolute quiet. It was the exact same chilling muteness he wielded ever since Caitlyn's cell phone abruptly disconnected. Weeping as he exited the courtroom, he finally displayed tears, the very first glimpse of emotion throughout 13 years of endless manhunts, press conferences, and candlelight vigils. Observing him closely, Tina Barrett verbalized a dark suspicion she harbored for over a decade. Fear brings out John Carter's tears. Back in 2011, while fabricating his alibi, he showed zero terror or grief. Now, the panic was real. The ensuing corridor spectacle shattered all expectations, shocking even those completely numb to John Carter's disturbing antics. Facing a swarm of journalists, his latest defense lawyer, Carl Lewis, addressed the press. Speaking for the defendant and his relatives, he proclaimed that despite legally admitting fault, John Carter possessed zero details to give the Markham family regarding Caitlyn's actual fate. Bizarrely, he then urged the Markhams to hunt down the supposedly true culprit. Even after confessing under oath, following the damning shed evidence, the disturbing journals, and bombing a lie detector at -25 on a scale capping at -3, after 13 agonizing years, they claimed someone else did it. Dave Markham stood mere inches away, absorbing this sickening audacity. The defendant's mother, Karen Winkler, lingered out in the corridor as well. Glancing toward the grieving father whose child was discarded in her own property's tarp, she insisted she genuinely loved Caitlyn and believed the couple was perfectly happy. Dave absorbed every twisted syllable. "That was the most bizarre thing I have heard," he later reflected. "Those were lies. That was delusional." A few months passed before John Carter petitioned for an early prison discharge, leveraging his supposedly flawless behavior after serving just half of his 3-year stint. Judge Haughey firmly rejected the motion. John Carter was ordered to complete his mandated time. However, deeper, darker offenses will permanently escape the legal system's grasp. Under Ohio mandates, prosecutors only get a strict 6-year window to pursue corpse defilement and evidence tampering. Because her bones stayed hidden for almost 2 years, that judicial timer had relentlessly ticked down since her initial vanishing. Once detectives finally built a solid case, the legal deadlines had expired. The phantom who relocated her corpse, segregating her skull into another sack, cruising 30 miles through pitch-black county borders with killed headlights, practically got away with it. Then looms the sinister mystery of an unnamed accomplice, blacked out in warrants, suspected of aiding the grotesque disposal. That shadowy figure remains completely untouched by the law. The unadulterated reality of those terrifying pre-dawn hours on August 13, 2011, might forever stay buried. John Carter refuses to illuminate the darkness. He gives zero insights. As Dave noted, the killer hasn't put forth a single ounce of effort. It speaks volumes about his dark nature. Honestly, an impromptu jailhouse confession wouldn't mean a thing after 13 years of sociopathic deceit. Just down the street from Caitlyn's residence sits a quiet green space harboring a very specific sapling. Locals dubbed it Caitlyn's butterfly tree. Leading up to the Judgment Day, Dave and Tina Barrett rallied their community at this tranquil spot, avoiding angry protests, to instead meticulously pen appeals to Judge Haughey, transforming 13 years of blinding agony into purposeful action. It was exactly the kind of meaningful tribute Caitlyn, a lifelong creator who possessed a gift for manifesting raw emotions into art, would have deeply appreciated. especially the butterflies, her absolute favorite symbol. Dave recalled those suffocating, early chapters of the investigation, when the agonizing uncertainty threatened to crush him completely. During those dark moments, a wandering butterfly would flutter past, leaving him to whisper, "There she is, radiant, alive, and breaking free." As he so painfully articulated, she was mimicking a caterpillar's metamorphosis. Her beautiful life had barely begun. Today, Dave Markham and Tina Barrett crusade for Caitlyn's law, aiming to stretch legal deadlines whenever a simple missing persons case evolves into a grisly murder inquiry. The statute of limitations, prosecutors argue, must activate the moment a body is discovered, never at the time of the initial vanishing. This shift would guarantee future victims are not deprived of justice, ensuring no murderer can simply lay low and let the calendar automatically pardon their crimes. Dave noted a bittersweet irony here. It aligned perfectly with Caitlyn's character to continue protecting strangers from beyond the grave, forever transforming tragedy into hope. She possessed the makings of an incredible adult, a certainty deeply held by both her father and her sister. Even the childhood mentor, who first unlocked her creative genius, carries that same heavy conviction. Anyone sharing a quiet moment with her felt profoundly understood. She lived a life of paint-stained hair and scattered sketchbooks, holding a bright destiny she entirely deserved. Yet that promise was violently erased by a predator who slumbered under the exact same roof as the hidden evidence for 12 long years, behaving as if he were entirely innocent. 3 meager years behind bars was the ultimate price. Meanwhile, the butterfly tree remains rooted in the earth, serving as a silent sanctuary where Dave still makes his pilgrimages. And somewhere inside that lingering, phantom echo of grief, the kind of devotion that stubbornly outlives the grave her spirit quietly endures. The story of Katelyn Markham is more than a tragic mystery. It is a haunting wake-up call hidden behind the cookie-cutter facades of suburban security. Her life, and the 13-year nightmare that followed, leaves us with a vital lesson. Intuition is a survival tool, not an inconvenience. We must learn to recognize the quiet red flags, the suffocating dominance, the emotional policing, and the hollow tone of a spirit being drained. Caitlyn's deadpan stare at a bank teller's desk was a silent scream for an exit strategy she never got to execute. It teaches us that domestic control doesn't always leave a bruise. Sometimes it leaves a cage. Beyond awareness, this is a call for systemic change. The agonizing irony of a 13-year search resulting in a mere 3-year sentence exposes a justice system where the clock favors the predator. We must champion Caitlyn's law to ensure that no killer can outrun their crimes by simply laying low. Let her butterfly tree be our sanctuary and our spark. We owe it to the silence to be their echoes. Watch the signs, fight for the truth, because a beautiful life should never be reduced to a statute of limitations.